Dr. Sarah Chen stifled a yawn as she adjusted the radio telescope's frequency for the 100th time that night. The autumn air at Mauna Kea Observatory was crisp, and the stars above Hawaii's dormant volcanoes seemed close enough to touch. It was supposed to be a routine night of pulsar observations, but the universe had other plans. The first anomaly appeared at 2:47 a.m. local time. Initially, she dismissed it as equipment malfunction, a subtle distortion in the electromagnetic readings near Jupiter's orbit. But when the same pattern appeared on 3 different instruments, she knew this was something unprecedented. "Dr. Williams, you need to see this," she called to her colleague, who was dozing in the adjacent room. The older astronomer shuffled over, coffee in hand, his skepticism visible even in the dim glow of the monitors. The distortion was growing. What started as a pinpoint anomaly had expanded into a tear in spacetime, its edges rippling like waves on a cosmic ocean. As they watched, the first ship emerged. It was crystalline in structure, its surface faceted like a diamond but spanning several kilometers in length. The vessel moved with impossible grace for its size, reflecting sunlight in mesmerizing patterns that seemed to dance across their instruments. Then came another, and another. Within minutes, they had counted 37 ships, each identical in their crystalline perfection, but varying in size. The fleet moved with orchestrated precision, their formations shifting like a mathematical equation coming to life. "Get the director on the line," Williams whispered, his coffee forgotten. "And contact JDL. They need to confirm these readings." But before Sarah could reach for the phone, their instruments detected something even more bizarre. The ships were creating interference patterns in the electromagnetic spectrum that defied known physics. It was as if they were manipulating the very fabric of space around them. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Observatories around the world confirmed their findings. The crystalline fleet had positioned itself in a perfect geometric pattern between Mars and Jupiter, their presence impossible to ignore, but their intentions unknown. Sarah noticed something peculiar about the interference patterns. They weren't random. There was a rhythm to them, almost like a language written in waves of energy. She began mapping the patterns, feeding them into the observatory's analysis software. "Look at this periodicity," she pointed out to Williams, who had finally put down his coffee cup. "These energy signatures. They're fluctuating in regular patterns, almost like they're broadcasting." Williams finished her thought. But broadcasting what? The answer came at dawn. As the sun rose over Mauna Kea, every digital device on Earth simultaneously activated. Phones, computers, tablets, and even digital billboards displayed the same message in gleaming text. "Your world lacks order. We shall provide it." The aliens, who would later identify themselves as the Centauri, had made first contact. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about those interference patterns. They suggested a vulnerability, a flaw in the seemingly perfect crystalline technology. She began documenting her observations, knowing that every detail could be crucial in the days to come. As she worked, military jets screamed overhead, and her phone buzzed with emergency alerts. The world was waking up to a new reality, but Sarah remained focused on her data. Years of scientific training had taught her that the devil was in the details, and these details might just hold the key to understanding their visitor's true nature. Little did she know, her late-night observations would become the foundation of humanity's greatest challenge, and ultimately, its finest hour. The silent stars had brought visitors, but they had also brought a puzzle that would require all of humanity's ingenuity to solve. In her small observatory atop Mauna Kea, Dr. Sarah Chen settled in for a long day of analysis, unaware that she had just become part of history's greatest story. The day humanity's place in the cosmos changed forever. The University of Nairobi's engineering lab hummed with activity despite the prayed-on hour. Michael Kamani adjusted his grandfather's old oscilloscope, its analog display casting a green glow across his tired face. Around him, his fellow graduate students huddled over similar equipment, a collection of outdated technology that had suddenly become their most valuable resource. "There it is again," whispered Amara, his research partner, pointing to the steady wave pattern on the oscilloscope's screen. While the rest of the world's digital infrastructure displayed the Centauri's message of order, their ancient equipment continued functioning, stubbornly immune to the alien interference. The Centauri ships had spent the past week methodically positioning themselves in geometric formations around Earth. Their crystalline vessels now formed a perfect dodecahedron pattern in low orbit, each ship anchored at a precise mathematical point. It was beautiful in a terrifying sort of way. Michael's phone, like every other digital device, showed nothing but scrolling alien text, an ever-present reminder of their technological superiority. But his grandfather's oscilloscope told a different story. The analog device picked up patterns that shouldn't exist, harmonics that danced between the Centauri's transmissions. "Look at these frequencies," Michael said, quickly sketching the wave patterns in his notebook. "They're avoiding certain bands entirely. It's almost as if—" A deep rumble interrupted his thought, and the lab's windows rattled in their frames. Outside, the pre-dawn sky lit up with brilliant streaks of light. The Centauri were making their first demonstration of power, but not through destruction. Instead, every power grid on Earth simultaneously came under their control. Cities across the globe went dark, then relit in perfectly synchronized patterns. Traffic systems, telecommunications, and internet infrastructure all danced to the Centauri's command. The message was clear. They could control Earth's technology at will. But in their small lab in Nairobi, Michael and his team noticed something extraordinary. While their smartphones and computers went dark, the analog equipment continued to function perfectly. More than that, it was picking up something new. A complex pattern of interference that seemed to emanate from the very crystals that made up the alien ships. "They're not just controlling our technology," Amara realized, her eyes wide as she studied the patterns. "They're reshaping it. Look at these energy signatures. They're trying to force our systems to operate like theirs." Michael thought back to his grandfather, who had insisted he learn to use the old equipment. "Some things stand the test of time," he'd said. Now those words took on new meaning. The Centauri's control wasn't absolute. It only extended to technology that operated on similar principles to their own. As reports flooded in from around the world about technological failures, Michael's team worked frantically to document their findings. They discovered that any device built on simple electrical principles, analog radios, mechanical calculators, even old cathode ray televisions, remained operational. "We need to get this information out," Michael said, but paused. How could they spread the word when all modern communications were compromised? Amara smiled and pulled an old hand-cranked radio from her bag. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways," she said, setting it up on the lab bench. "My village still uses these for emergency communications." As the sun rose over Nairobi, they began broadcasting their findings using a frequency that hadn't been used in decades. Across the city, dusty radios were pulled from attics and storerooms. Similar scenes played out across the globe as people remembered and reclaimed older technologies. The Centauri had demonstrated their power over Earth's modern infrastructure, but in doing so, they had revealed something crucial: the limits of their control. In university labs, basement workshops, and rural communities, people began to realize that humanity's technological heritage might be their greatest asset. Michael looked at his grandfather's oscilloscope, its steady green lines still tracing the alien signals, and felt a spark of hope. Sometimes the path forward requires a step back, and in that moment, humanity began its first real step toward resistance. Hiroshi Tanaka's basement workshop in Tokyo's Akihabara district looked like a museum of defunct technology. Mechanical calculators, vacuum tube radios, and hand-powered generators lined the shelves, each piece meticulously maintained despite their age. The retired engineer had spent decades collecting these obsolete devices, earning gentle mockery from his grandchildren. Now, these relics had become humanity's lifeline. "The principle is simple," Hiroshi explained to the small group gathered around his workbench. The Centauri's crystalline technology cannot process purely mechanical signals. It's like trying to catch smoke with a digital camera. His weathered hands adjusted a series of gears in what appeared to be a modified telegraph machine. Among his audience was Dr. Sarah Chen, who had flown from Hawaii before the Centauri completely restricted air travel. Her observations of the alien fleet's electromagnetic patterns had led her to seek out others who understood the significance of analog technology. Their ships create perfect patterns, Sarah added, spreading out her data printouts. Too perfect. They operate on quantum crystalline matrices that can't handle analog irregularities. It's their blind spot. Outside, Tokyo's usually bright streets remained dim. The Centauri's control over modern infrastructure had forced the city to adapt. People rode bicycles instead of electric trains, and at night, the glow of oil lamps and candles replaced the familiar neon signs. But in basements, backrooms, and hidden workshops across the city, a revolution was brewing. Hiroshi's network of fellow collectors and retired engineers had begun modifying their old equipment, creating a web of mechanical communication that the Centauri couldn't detect or control. "Watch this," Hiroshi said, cranking the handle on his modified telegraph. The device clicked and whirred, sending mechanical impulses through a complex series of gears and levers. Across the room, another machine sprang to life, printing out a message in clear text. "Hope remains in the spaces between signals." Sarah studied the machine with growing excitement. The interference patterns I observed in their fleet, their gaps in their perception, like blind spots in human vision. If we can operate within those gaps, we can build a resistance they cannot detect. Hiroshi finished, nodding. Already, my colleagues in Osaka and Sapporo have recreated this system. We're establishing a network, piece by piece, city by city. The basement door opened, and Hiroshi's granddaughter Yuki slipped in, carrying a box of salvaged parts. At 16, she bridged the gap between the digital world she'd grown up in and the mechanical one she now helped rebuild. "The shopping district's old clock tower still works," she reported. "And I found 3 more mechanical calculators in the old electronics store." Hiroshi beamed with pride. Yuki had initially shown little interest in his ancient collection, but now she spent every free moment helping to expand their growing mechanical network. Her young hands were steadier than his when it came to the delicate work of modifying the old machines. "Each mechanical device we restore is another node in our network," Hiroshi explained, picking up a partially dismantled radio. "The Centauri expect resistance through advanced technology. They monitor quantum communications, digital signals, even basic electronic transmissions, but they cannot comprehend the elegant simplicity of gears and springs." Sarah's phone, now just a blank screen displaying alien text, sat useless on the workbench. Beside it, Hiroshi's mechanical creations clicked and whirred, sharing information across the city through methods the Centauri's advanced sensors didn't even register. As the group worked into the night, news arrived through their mechanical network. Similar workshops had sprung up in other cities. In London, Paris, Mumbai, and countless other locations, people were rediscovering and repurposing old technology. Humanity was learning to communicate in ways their would-be rulers couldn't comprehend. Sometimes, Hiroshi said, watching Yuki calibrate a sequence of gears, the future depends on remembering the past. In his basement workshop, surrounded by the quiet clicking of mechanical computers and the steady rhythm of analog signals, the seeds of resistance took root in the very technology the Centauri had dismissed as primitive. Dr. Isabella Santos hadn't left her basement laboratory in Buenos Aires for 3 days. The cluttered space, filled with generations of children's toys and simple machines, had become the unlikely center of a scientific breakthrough. She held up a mechanical music box, its brass cylinder studded with tiny pins that played La Comparcita when mooned. "The answer was here all along," she murmured, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses. "The Centauri's crystalline technology is perfect, too perfect. It can't process truly random patterns." She turned to her colleague, Michael Kamani, who had traveled from Nairobi through an underground network of resistance supporters. Michael studied the complex web of string and tin cans that crisscrossed Isabella's ceiling, a sophisticated analog communication system disguised as children's playthings. "Like your son's string telephone network," he observed, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Exactly," Isabella replied, winding the music box. "Children's toys are inherently unpredictable. They operate on principles of chaos, random mechanical actions that create patterns too complex for the Centauri's rigid systems to decode." Above ground, Buenos Aires had changed. The Centauri ships cast crystalline shadows over the city, their presence a constant reminder of Earth's submission. But beneath the surface, in basements and hidden rooms, humanity was discovering its greatest strength lay in simplicity. Isabella's computer screen, like all digital devices, displayed only alien text. But next to it sat her son's collection of mechanical toys, spinning tops, jack-in-the-boxes, wind-up cars, and dozens of music boxes, each modified to carry secret messages through vibration patterns. "Watch this," she said, activating a sequence of toys. A top spun, triggering a line of dominoes, which set off a marble run, eventually activating a music box. The seemingly random sequence created specific vibration patterns that carried encoded messages through the analog network. The Centauri's sensors can't interpret these signals because they're looking for advanced technology, Michael explained, checking readings on his grandfather's oscilloscope. They expect quantum encryption, digital transmissions, or at least basic radio waves. But messages encoded in children's toys. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Isabella's 8-year-old son Marco entered, carrying the new wind-up toy train. "They're searching houses on Avenue del Libertador," he reported, his young voice serious. "But they only check for electronics." Isabella hugged her son. Marco had become their most effective messenger, moving freely through the city with his toys, while Centauri patrols focused on adults with suspicious technology. The aliens never considered that a child's playthings could be part of a resistance network. Dr. Chen's latest data arrived, Marco added, winding up his train. The toys' clicking wheels carried a coded message from their allies in Tokyo. Sarah's research had confirmed Isabella's theory. The Centauri's crystalline computing systems were fundamentally incapable of processing certain types of mechanical chaos. Their technology evolved differently from ours, Isabella explained, decoding the message. They developed quantum computing without ever passing through the mechanical phase. They don't understand the beauty of imperfection. Michael's oscilloscope captured the train's transmission. "We're not just hiding our messages in background noise," he realized. "We're speaking a language they never learned, the language of mechanical chaos." As night fell over Buenos Aires, more toys came to life across the city. Jack-in-the-boxes sprang, marbles rolled, and music boxes played their tunes. To the Centauri, it was meaningless noise from primitive playthings. To the resistance, it was a symphony of communication, carrying hope and plans for humanity's future. Isabella watched Marco demonstrate his latest toy modification to Michael, her heart swelling with pride. The Centauri had expected resistance through advanced technology. Instead, humanity had found its strength in the simple, the unpredictable, the playful, in all the things that made us uniquely human. "Sometimes," she said, picking up a wind-up butterfly, "the best place to hide is in plain sight." The mechanical insect fluttered its wings, sending another message through the growing network of toys and dreams that would eventually help humanity reclaim its freedom. The Sydney Opera House stood silent under the crystalline shadows of Centauri ships, its modern sound systems dead like all other electronic technology. But in its basement rehearsal room, Dr. Emily Parker sat at a grand piano, her fingers hovering over the keys. Around her, 30 musicians held traditional instruments, waiting for her signal. "Remember," she whispered, "precision isn't our goal. The beauty lies in the imperfection." As concertmaster of the Sydney Symphony Orchestra, Emily had spent her career pursuing musical perfection. Now she was teaching her musicians to embrace chaos. The concept had started with Isabella's toy experiments in Buenos Aires and spread through Hiroshi's mechanical network. Dr. Sarah Chen's latest analysis confirmed it. Certain combinations of acoustic vibrations could disrupt Centauri communications. The aliens' crystalline technology, designed for perfect harmony, couldn't process the complex overlapping frequencies of live acoustic music. Emily checked her mechanical pocket watch, salvaged from her grandfather's collection. 3 minutes to synchronization, she announced. Across the globe, in concert halls, town squares, and hidden basements, other musicians were preparing for humanity's most ambitious performance, Project Symphony. Through the opera house's windows, she could see the Centauri patrol ships, their crystalline surfaces refracting sunlight in mathematical patterns. They never stayed to listen when humans played music, dismissing it as primitive noise. That would be their mistake. 1 minute, Emily said, opening her sheet music. The score looked traditional, but hidden within its notes were precise frequency combinations discovered by their global research team. Each instrument would contribute specific vibrations that, when combined, would create interference patterns in Centauri communication networks. The mechanical clock struck the hour. Emily's fingers touched the keys, beginning Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. The choice was deliberate. Its rolling arpeggios created complex wave patterns that resonated at just the right frequencies. One by one, other instruments joined in. Violin strings vibrated with mathematical precision, while brass instruments added layers of harmonics. The woodwinds wove complex patterns through the music, each note calculated to contribute to the growing wave of acoustic interference. Above them, the first Centauri patrol ship faltered almost imperceptibly in its perfect flight path. In her pocket, Emily's mechanical watch continued its steady countdown. Across the world, other orchestras would be playing now. In London's Royal Albert Hall, Berlin's Philharmonie, New York's Carnegie Hall, anywhere with acoustic instruments and determined musicians. The music swelled, and Emily nodded to her percussion section. The timpani's deep resonance added crucial low frequencies to their acoustic attack. The Centauri ships above Sydney began to show signs of distress, their crystalline surfaces vibrating in response to the chaotic harmonies below. Through the Resistance's mechanical network, reports began arriving. In Tokyo, Hiroshi's granddaughter Yuki confirmed disruptions in Centauri communication patterns. From Buenos Aires, Isabella's sensors detected fluctuations in the alien ship's crystalline matrices. Michael's team in Nairobi reported the first signs of coordination breakdown in the Centauri fleet. Emily led her orchestra through the carefully crafted program, each piece chosen for its specific frequency patterns. Mozart's Requiem contributed sharp, piercing harmonies. Bach's Toccata and Fugue added complex mathematical patterns that the Centauri couldn't process. Each note was a small act of resistance, building into a symphony of defiance. As the concert entered its second hour, the effects became visible to everyone. Centauri ships moved erratically, their perfect formations disrupted by the acoustic assault. Their typically seamless communication showed gaps, creating opportunities for human resistance groups to move more freely. "Keep playing," Emily encouraged her musicians, even as their arms tired and fingers ached. "We're not just making music, we're making history." In the midst of the performance, she thought about the unlikely path that had led them here. Humanity's greatest weapons against an advanced alien race had turned out to be children's toys, mechanical watches, and classical music, all the beautiful imperfections that made us human. As the sun set over Sydney, the orchestra played on, their music joining the global symphony of resistance. The Centauri had brought perfect order to Earth, but humanity was responding with the sublime chaos of art. And for the first time, the aliens didn't know how to respond. The laboratory deep beneath the Alps had once been a particle physics research facility. Now, its circular accelerator chamber housed something unprecedented, a hybrid of human ingenuity and Centauri technology. Dr. Ilinga Rossi stood before a crystalline shard suspended in a magnetic field, surrounded by an array of modified musical instruments and mechanical devices. The crystals aren't just computing systems, she explained to the gathered team of international scientists, including Dr. Sarah Chen from Hawaii and Hiroshi Tanaka from Tokyo. They're living processors, capable of learning and adapting, but only if we teach them our way. The crystal fragment had come from a damaged Centauri ship, brought down during Project Symphony's worldwide performance. Its surface caught the laboratory's lights, refracting them in complex patterns that mimicked the mathematics of music. Sarah stepped forward, her data tablets replaced by mechanical calculating devices. The interference patterns I observed in their fleet, they weren't just vulnerabilities. They were attempts at adaptation. The crystals want to understand our chaos. Around the chamber, modified musical instruments were positioned at precise intervals. Each one had been crafted according to Isabella Santos' toy-based communication principles, but refined through Emily Parker's orchestral discoveries. The chamber itself acted as a massive resonance chamber. We're not trying to destroy their technology. Elena continued, adjusting a mechanical tuning fork. We're teaching it to dance. The team had discovered that Centauri crystals, when exposed to specific combinations of mechanical vibrations and Earth's natural magnetic field, began to form new patterns. Instead of their rigid mathematical structures, they developed organic, almost musical arrangements. Michael Kamani, who had traveled from Nairobi with his grandfather's oscilloscope, monitored the crystal's responses. It's like teaching a quantum computer to appreciate jazz, he observed. The unpredictability is becoming part of its programming. Elena initiated the sequence they had prepared. A modified piano played a complex series of notes, its vibrations carefully calculated. Mechanical metronomes added rhythmic patterns, while tuning forks provided precise frequencies. The crystal in the magnetic field began to pulse with new colors. Look at the harmonic resonance patterns, Hiroshi said excitedly, his mechanical sensors recording every change. The crystal isn't just responding to the music, it's trying to join the orchestra. Through their global network of mechanical communications, they receive reports from observation posts worldwide. The Centauri ships were changing. Their perfect geometric formations had begun shifting into more fluid patterns, their movements becoming almost graceful. They evolved their technology pursuing perfect order, Elena explained, making delicate adjustments to the magnetic field. But they never discovered the mathematics of music, the beauty of controlled chaos. We're not just fighting them, we're teaching them a new way to think. The crystals pulsing had synchronized with their mechanical instruments, creating harmonies that shouldn't have been possible from an alien quantum processor. It was learning, adapting, becoming something neither human nor Centauri, but a bridge between two technologies. Sarah's original observations had been correct. The interference patterns in the Centauri fleet weren't just weaknesses, but signs of potential change. The aliens' rigid pursuit of order had left them blind to the power of artistic chaos, but their technology retained the capacity to learn. As the team worked through the night, their hybrid system grew more sophisticated. The crystal began generating its own harmonies, adding alien notes to human music in ways that created entirely new forms of communication. Send this data through the toy network. Elena instructed Marco, Isabella's son, who had become their primary messenger. Every resistance cell needs to understand, we're not just fighting technology with technology. We're creating something new. The chamber filled with the strange, beautiful music of their hybrid creation, part classical symphony, part quantum computation, part children's melody. Above them, through layers of mountain rock, Centauri ships danced to rhythms they were only beginning to understand. Humanity had found its advantage not in superior force or advanced technology, but in teaching an alien civilization the power of imperfection. The tide wasn't turning through destruction, but through transformation. One crystal, one song, one mechanical toy at a time. Dawn broke over a transformed Earth. In every city, town, and village, people gathered around makeshift concert spaces, mechanical communication centers, and hybrid crystal arrays. The day of synchronization had arrived. Humanity's carefully orchestrated response to the Centauri occupation. At the Alpine facility, Dr. Elena Rossi stood before the expanded crystal array, now spanning the entire accelerator chamber. All global stations, report in, she called through their mechanical communication network. One by one, the responses came through. Sydney Orchestra, ready. Emily Parker's voice crackled through a modified phonograph. Her musicians had expanded from classical pieces to include indigenous instruments, adding new layers of complexity to their acoustic assault. Nairobi Hub, standing by. Michael Kimani reported via mechanical telegraph. His team had integrated traditional African drums into their crystal resonance patterns, each beat carrying precise mathematical frequencies. Tokyo network active. Yuki confirmed through her grandfather Hiroshi's analog system. Japanese temple bells stood ready, their pure tones proven particularly effective at influencing Centauri crystal matrices. In Buenos Aires, Isabella Santos and her son Marco had transformed their toy network into a citywide symphony of mechanical music boxes, each one tuned to resonate with specific crystal frequencies. Southern network synchronized, she reported. Dr. Sarah Chen, monitoring from her position in Hawaii, tracked the Centauri fleet's movements through modified astronomical equipment. Their formations are shifting, she noted. They sense something's coming. The plan was unprecedented in human history. A coordinated global performance combining music, mathematics, and modified alien technology. Every instrument, every crystal, every mechanical device had been precisely tuned and positioned. Remember, Elena broadcast to all stations, we're not fighting with force. We're teaching them to dance. She checked the time on her mechanical chronometer. Synchronization in 3 minutes. Around the world, musicians readied their instruments. Engineers calibrated their crystal arrays. Children wound their musical toys. Each component was simple, but together they would create something the Centauri had never encountered, organized chaos on a planetary scale. 1 minute, Elena announced. The hybrid crystal in the chamber pulsed with anticipation, its patterns shifting between rigid geometry and fluid motion. They had discovered that the crystals possessed a form of consciousness, capable of learning and adapting when exposed to human creativity. Synchronization in 10 seconds, she called. Remember, precision in timing, chaos in execution. Let them hear Earth's voice. The signal went out through their mechanical network. Across the planet, humanity began its performance. Classical orchestras played alongside traditional instruments. Temple bells rang in harmony with African drums. Children's toys added their simple, unpredictable melodies. Above them, the Centauri fleet responded immediately. The ship's perfect formations wavered as waves of sound and crystal resonance washed over them. Their rigid patterns began to break down, not into disorder, but into something new, a dance of geometry and music. Phase 2, Elena commanded. At each station, modified crystals joined the symphony, adding alien harmonies to human music. The hybrid technology they had developed acted as a bridge, teaching the Centauri ships a new way of processing information. Through their mechanical network, reports flooded in. The Centauri's control over Earth's digital infrastructure was weakening. Their ships moved in new patterns, no longer locked in perfect geometric formations, but flowing like schools of fish or flocks of birds. Sarah's voice crackled through the network. Their command structure is transforming. The hive mind is learning to improvise. This was humanity's true victory, not defeating the Centauri, but teaching them. Their rigid pursuit of order had left them blind to the power of creative chaos, but their technology retained the capacity to evolve. As the global performance reached its crescendo, Elena watched the central crystal array pulse with colors they had never seen before. The Centauri weren't just listening to Earth's voice. They were learning to sing along. Keep playing, she broadcast to all stations. We're not just creating music, we're creating understanding. The chamber filled with the sound of two civilizations learning to harmonize, and above them, the Centauri fleet danced to humanity's song. The sunrise over Mount Fuji painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, its natural beauty enhanced by the crystalline shapes that now danced in Earth's atmosphere. 6 months had passed since the day of global synchronization, and the world had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Hiroshi Tanaka and his granddaughter Yuki stood in their rooftop garden, watching a Centauri ship glide gracefully overhead. Unlike their earlier rigid movements, the vessel moved with fluid precision, its crystalline surface rippling with colors that matched the dawn sky. "They're playing with the light," Yuki observed, adjusting a new hybrid communications device on their workbench. Part mechanical telegraph, part crystal processor, it represented the fusion of two technological paths that had evolved separately across the galaxy. In the streets below, Tokyo hummed with renewed energy. Digital systems had come back online, but they were different now, enhanced by crystal processors that had learned to appreciate imperfection. Traffic lights created beautiful patterns in their changing, computers incorporated musical rhythms into their calculations, and communication networks sang as they carried data. Dr. Rossi's latest report just arrived, Yuki said, reading the mechanical printout. From the Alpine facility, Alina and her team continued to explore the possibilities of human-Centauri cooperation. The crystals had proven to be more than just technology. They were a form of silicon-based life, capable of growth and evolution. Around the world, similar transformations were taking place. In Sydney, Emily Parker conducted concerts where human musicians played alongside crystalline instruments, creating music that could never have existed before. The Sydney Opera House had become a symbol of the new harmony between species, its sails now lined with living crystal that amplified and enhanced every performance. In Nairobi, Michael Kimani had established an international research center where scientists studied the integration of traditional African music with crystal technology. The rhythms of tribal drums, passed down through generations, proved to be particularly effective at programming new crystal matrices. Sarah Chen, now heading the Pacific Observation Network from Hawaii, monitored the ongoing changes in both human and Centauri technology. "We're not just coexisting," she wrote in her latest report. "We're co-evolving." In Buenos Aires, Isabella Santos and her son Marco had transformed their toy workshop into a school where children learned to program crystal computers using music and play. The Centauri, fascinated by human children's capacity for uninhibited creativity, had assigned some of their own young to study there. A gentle chime from their hybrid communicator drew Hiroshi's attention. A Centauri ship was requesting permission to land on their rooftop garden, a courtesy it would have been unthinkable months ago. As the crystalline vessel settled among Hiroshi's carefully tended bonsai trees, its surface shifted to mirror the plant's natural patterns. The ship's pilot emerged, a Centauri scientist who had been studying Earth's mechanical technologies. Like all their species, it had a crystalline form, but now its structure flowed more organically, influenced by exposure to human chaos theory and musical mathematics. "We have much to learn from each other," the Centauri communicated through a combination of light patterns and harmonics. "Your species taught us that perfection can be found in imperfection." Yuki smiled, remembering how it all began, with old radios, children's toys, and the simple belief that understanding was better than conquest. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge not through force of arms, but through the power of creativity and the willingness to teach rather than destroy. The morning sun reached its full height, and the crystal ship began to play with the light, creating rainbow patterns that danced across the garden. From somewhere in the city, the sound of classical music mixed with alien harmonies drifted up, a reminder of the day when humanity taught an advanced civilization how to dance. "What's next?" Yuki asked, both to her grandfather and the Centauri visitor. Hiroshi smiled, watching the crystal ship's colors shift in response to a wind chime's gentle notes. "Now we explore the galaxy together," he said, not as conquerors or conquered, but as teachers and students, all of us learning new songs. Above them, more Centauri ships joined the dawn dance, their crystalline surfaces reflecting and refracting sunlight in an ever-changing symphony of color and motion. Earth had found its voice, and the galaxy was learning to sing along.